Capitola, and I'm joined today by our city manager, Jamie Goldstein, as well as our city clerk, Chloe Woodmansey, who's going to moderate for us today. And we're receiving an additional staff assistant from our community development director, Katie Herlihy. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our moderator to give some information about how we'll be managing today's meeting.
I'll actually tackle that a little bit for you, Mayor Peterson. So this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the city's website for future viewing. Attendees are going to be muted during the meeting, but if you do have questions you'd like to submit during the meeting for the moderator or for us to answer that the moderator could see, just use the chat function and the Q&A function in Zoom, and the moderator can see the questions and then ask us to answer. So thank you for attending, and thank you for those of you who submitted questions before we started this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to our city clerk for the first question.
Thank you. This question is for both city manager and Mayor Peterson. How is the pandemic impacting the city of Capitola's operations?
That's a great question. During the initial shelter in place, our city hall was closed, but we had a greatly expanded remote service options. Today, City Hall is open to the public, and if people need in-person services, they're welcome to come to City Hall. We have social distance requirements in place. We're requiring masks as well. Our police station has remained open during the pandemic and has been subject to social distancing during this time also. We've also seen closures of our community center. Our in-person recreation classes were canceled. And we had a unique shift to online classes, which has been wonderful. We're also offering a much smaller junior guard camp program this summer so that we can ensure smaller and consistent groups of youth that limit their exposure with one another. Additionally, the beach closures from the county health officer have had a large impact on our community and our village, and have posed unique enforcement challenges, but we're doing our best to enforce the daily beach closures and using extra services from a private security firm to enforce those beach closure times.
Thank you. And City Manager Goldstein, is Capitola tracking cases of COVID-19 at our city level so that you can monitor the impact of the increasing activity throughout our community?
Yes, absolutely. So the city, what we do every single city council meeting is we start our meeting off with an update on kind of the situation with COVID-19. That always involves kind of an analysis and taking a look at what the data numbers show for our region. In addition, you can, from the county's dashboard, you can actually pull up the number of cases specific to Capitola, and you can see those. The County Public Health Department website is the place to go for the best data for our community. I would remind folks that the numbers for Capitola, I believe when I checked this morning, I think there was 9 total cases in the community of Capitola. It is, this is a international pandemic, and certainly while our cases are going to be influenced by what's going on in our county, Northern California region in general. So thankfully our numbers have remained very low through this, and we will continue to track them and keep an eye on them as we move forward into the future.
Thank you. This question is for both of you. What does the city's projected revenue look like going forward for the remainder of this fiscal year, given the pandemic? What kind of reductions in city services are we going to see?
Good question. I think the largest long-term impact to the city so far will be the impact on our city revenues. Capitola revenue comes primarily from sales tax and short-term rental taxes. And this revenue is dependent on people shopping and coming to stay overnight in our city. And so, of course, with COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place orders, tourism and shopping has kind of been on hold for a lot of us. And this means that 2 of our biggest revenue streams have seen staggering declines. And it's unknown how those revenue streams will respond as we move forward in the coming months. To answer the question directly, for the current fiscal year, we're expecting approximately $1.5 million shortfall that is going to be covered by city fund balances. And I'll turn it over to our city manager for any comments on what it's going to look like moving forward into future fiscal years.
Yeah, moving ahead is going to be it's going to be a significant challenge. How long, I think, really will depend on what the overall economic situation and how the economy bounces back, whether we have a second wave that requires re-implementing some of the requirements, the shelter-in-place orders that we saw previously. But when we adopted our budget for next fiscal year, that'll start on July 1st, so coming up here in a couple of weeks, we had to cut about $4.5 million out of our budget, which is pretty significant considering the city's budget is about 17 million. That came from primarily about a 25% reduction in what we thought our revenues were going to look like. And what we did was we essentially cut everything that the city does that isn't really mandated by law or necessary for employees to do their work. So we're paying the PG&E bills and we're paying to keep the police cars on the road, but a lot of the extras just won't happen this next year. Some more of the kind of nuances, the specifics about we've reduced our personnel costs by about 14%. 13% of the city's jobs won't be filled next year. That's out of a staff of about 67 full-time employees. So a pretty significant reduction in the number of people working for the city this next year. I think the thing that the community may notice the most is in the village is we're going to have less of a presence doing the kind of maintenance that we've historically done. We've had to cut back on janitorial services. We've cut back on our extra help in terms of the maintenance crews for the summer. We've cut back on, we used to contract with a nonprofit to do trash pickup in the village. So I think the service levels in the village are not going to be what people maybe have always expected in the past. We have identified our priority for our maintenance workers who are working this summer. Number one is trash cleanup. And number two priority is the fire abatement, the weed abatement, to try to protect against those kinds of impacts. The larger projects that our crews do, the new fences, the small park projects, things like that, those have all been put on hold.
Okay, so Mayor Peterson, do you have an update on our library project?
Yeah, I was really excited to be part of the groundbreaking for our library in 2018, and there have been numerous community volunteers, community organizations, the library groups, the city staff here. Just so much work has gone into this incredible project that we've been working on for several years now. Construction was able to continue at the library project during the shelter-in-place orders, and we are projecting an opening date in late 2020. So I was excited to be part of the groundbreaking, and I'm looking forward to be part of the ribbon cutting.
That's wonderful news. Follow-up question for you is, what about the Capitola Mall project, and has that been affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a project that we've been had our eyes on for several years now. Also, currently the applicant is making some project modifications, and we're anticipating that they will be submitting an application this year.
Thank you.
Before we get to the next question, I guess just one thing I might add is that, you know, in talking directly with the mall owners, they built a project that they proposed to the city initially that was predicated around retail shopping, theater, gyms, outdoor shopping experiences. And so a lot of those things have been really directly affected by the pandemic and the shelter in place. So they have taken a step back and are taking a look at what their model and what they're going to propose. They remain committed to the project, they tell us, and they're refining things at this point, and we do hope that they'll come in with a project here later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. This next question is for both of you. Is the city getting any CARES Act money from the federal government?
Yes, the federal government is allocating funds to assist in the recovery from COVID-19 pandemic through grants. The grant money has to be utilized specifically towards COVID-19 response for communities of low and moderate income. So Capitola plans to use these funds to assist in food distribution, rental assistance, homeless facilities, and forgivable loans for local businesses. We anticipate, or rather city staff anticipates, receiving the first of 3 rounds of this funding within the next 60 days. And our first round of funding will be focused on assisting with food distribution, rental assistance, and local business support.
The second piece of the puzzle is you may have heard that in the CARES Act, there was actually an allocation of funding that went to the largest cities in the country. I don't remember what the threshold size was, but I think it was like populations over 1 million people, something like that. So they got some direct funding. At the state level, they're working out a way to get some direct funding to cities. At this point in the governor's budget, it looks like there may be a $12 per capita allocation to smaller cities, which would mean about $120,000 for Capitola, which would be used for direct COVID expenditures from the city. So that's like purchasing PPE for city staff or the public, signs that we've had to put in place to inform people of the social distancing rules. In addition, the overtime and the extra costs for enforcement around the beach, things like that would be direct expenditures that we'd be able to use the funding for. It's not going to close the $4.5 million deficit that we have next year, but it does help with some of the direct costs that we've seen.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson, we've received many questions about Capitola Beach. So 2 basic questions have come up. Who has the authority to make the rules in Capitola, and when will our beach rules change?
Sure. Yeah, we have received a lot of questions about this. Because we're in a public health crisis, the state health officer and our county health officer are legally responsible for protecting public safety. That's their #1 priority. The city of Capitola does not have our own health officer. In fact, only 3 cities in the state of California do. And so we fall under the jurisdiction of the Santa Cruz County health officer. And so we are under the county and state rules. As a city, we're allowed to add to those rules, making things stricter, but we can't be more lenient than the county and the state allow. This is why the city cannot decide independently to open our beach or to allow large gatherings until the county says that it's okay for us to do so. Unfortunately, just city staff and city council does not have the authority to make the kind of decisions regarding the beach closure. Right now, the county health order closes the beach from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. It's still in effect, and it will be until at least until July 6th. At that point, the county health officer has indicated that she will revisit, and hopefully the beach restrictions will be lifted on July 6th. Once that happens, it will still be very important that visitors maintain social distancing and wear face coverings when in close proximity to others outside your household for extended periods of time. I know it's not our typical idea of a fun beach day to have face coverings, but this is, as we've heard so many times, a new and different kind of normal. And so as we move forward, hopefully coming after July 6th, we'll be able to enjoy our beaches again.
Thank you. So in the time being, City Manager Goldstein, if our beach is closed, are Capitola parks closed as well?
So at this point, all of Capitola parks are open. That includes the Capitola Wharf, our skate park. The only exception to that would be the playgrounds. I believe the playgrounds remain closed just due to the fact that there's so many, the kids touch so many of the same things, and there isn't really any good way to clean them. So the Capitola parks are open at this point. The playgrounds are closed.
Thank you. For both of you, City Manager and Mayor, the public has been noticing businesses are opening up everywhere, and I think they just want some clarification on what's happening, which businesses are allowed to be reopened at this time.
Sure. So at this point in this county, in Santa Cruz County, we've aligned our openings, our business activity with what the state of California is doing. And the state of California has what they call the Resilience Roadmap, which is a 4-stage plan for reopening the state. Right now, we're in stage 2. And that has let a number of businesses just open here in the last week. That includes hotels for tourist travel, short-term rentals, the same thing, and movie theaters, provided that they have limited seating capacity and can provide social distancing. So that's the resilience roadmap from the state of California. If you want to find it and you want to take a look at what that looks like, you can just Google California Resilience Roadmap and you can find it at the state's website. It talks about which different stage and what type of activity might be allowed. And then Mayor Peterson, I think there were some other elements you're going to talk about here as well.
Yeah, at the local level, we've changed several of our rules to allow the city to issue over-the-counter permits for certain business activities. So that includes outdoor dining and to-go windows and other activities that will ensure safe social distancing. The intent here is to allow more flexibility for the businesses to engage in outdoor commerce, and being outdoors, this kind of outdoor commerce, outdoor dining is thought to reduce overall risk to both patrons and employees of these businesses.
Thank you. And City Manager Goldstein, that brings us to this question. There's been a lot of public support and comments that they love the outdoor seating, super happy to see the village open. Questions of how long that's going to last, and if there's going to be any kind of a city shuttle from the upper parking lots into the village like we're used to seeing.
So we're looking at the outdoor seating on the Esplanade as probably a 4-month trial period, and then we'll evaluate how it's going. The other rules that we have in place that allow businesses to use their private parking lots, maybe for outdoor activity, those, at this point, we think that they'll last as long as the social distancing rules last. So where we're still encouraging folks to keep distances and not be in enclosed spaces in close proximity. So that's what we're thinking with those rules, and we'll be evaluating what happens on the Esplanade as we get to the end of the summer. Now the shuttle, we're not going to run the shuttle this year. There's definitely the budgetary impact, the fact that we have such a large deficit. That was one of the elements we had to cut. In addition, I think it's probably safe to say that everyone would be better off and safer by taking a walk outdoors from the parking lots down to the village rather than getting into a shuttle and sharing it with people who are outside their families. So shuttles won't be running. We encourage everybody, though, to just make the walk and socially distance themselves while they do so.
Thank you. And one more question for you. How does the public apply and get a building or planning permit right now?
So as we mentioned earlier, our front desk is open. And so in the mornings, you can come in and get your planning permits. And then in the afternoons, you can come in and get your building permits. So 9 to noon for planning and then 1 to 4 for building. If you don't know which one you want, give a call. Someone will answer and you can figure out whether you need a planning permit or a building permit. In addition, we've greatly expanded our online capabilities. So if you don't want to come in or you just prefer to do it online, go to the city's website and you can click on community development and get information about how to submit applications online.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson, we've also had a lot of questions come in regarding how social distancing requirements at these businesses with this expanded activity and on the beach closure, how are they being enforced and why are so many people breaking the rules?
That's a great question. In Capitola, our small police department is charged with enforcing the health orders. And that responsibility comes on top of the almost 22,000 calls for service that usually come in for police services each year, not counting what we're experiencing now in the era of COVID-19. So the city has tried to emphasize education over very strict enforcement and has purchased numerous signs and banners that emphasize personal responsibility for social distancing and wearing masks. And hopefully we'll have those banners up pretty soon here. In addition, our community development department has been working directly with many small businesses to help them understand how they can comply with regulation. At the end of the day, our 14 police officers can't really ticket our way to compliance. And so we depend on the public's cooperation in these efforts in order to keep our community safe. And we're hoping that the public outreach and information and education efforts through the signs and the banners will help, and people will get the message that we need to be maintaining social distance and wearing a mask, even when we're not in a store, just walking down the sidewalks in the village. It's something that's really important.
Thank you, Mayor. That brings us to a bigger question for the city manager here. How does Capitola Police engage with our community?
It's a great question. You know, our police department has a long history of community engagement. You know, it dates back multiple police chiefs and certainly even predates my time here, more than 10 years. One of the kind of core aspects of what we do is what we call problem-oriented policing, or POP projects. And the POP projects are really intended to be identifying things in our community where there's recurring problems and looking for solutions. So for example, if we noticed that there was recurring incidents of graffiti or something along those lines in an area, trying to look at what are the underlying causes of that. Are there environmental changes that could be made, moving benches, changing landscaping, things like that, or maybe a property owner isn't taking care of their property and we need to work with them to upkeep on their property, things like that. So these these POP projects, we call them, are at the core of what the city has done, the police department has done for a long time. And all of our officers, when they're evaluated, are evaluated on what kind of POP projects they tackled in the last period and how successful they were. So it's where we really kind of ask our officers to go above and beyond just writing tickets to get people to comply. It's looking at the underlying issues behind what's going on. The city also employs 2 community service officers. Those are non-sworn, they're not police officers, but they help supplement the police department and respond to kind of the community type calls so that we're not putting armed officers in a position of just trying to deal with some maybe minor issue that somebody has. So the community service officers are also a big part of that. Recently, the city police department was a real active participant in these dialogue circles with the New Brighton Middle School. It was a program that was sponsored by the United Way that really brought youth in our community into face-to-face interactions with our officers over a series of events over several months. And it was really designed to give young people an opportunity to get to know some of the people who serve in leadership and policing roles and get to know them beyond just interactions on the street. And that was a really, I think, valuable thing for the community, a valuable thing for some of our officers who participated in it. We've had a long relationship with New Brighton Middle School as a police department. Our police department frequently gives lectures there. We have a designated officer who's a lead point person who can work with the school if there's issues around pickup or traffic, or if there's concerns around people not following the rules. We've also been trying to reinvigorate our neighborhood watch program. It was something that was done a lot back in the day, and then probably something that people hadn't been focused on recently. And in 2018, we've looked at trying to help neighborhoods that want to have a neighborhood watch program reinvigorate that. And then in addition, our police department is really active in a bunch of community organizations. The Chamber of Commerce, there are board members there. Participate with the Capitola Village Association, Public Safety Foundation in Capitola that puts on the car show every year and helps fund a bunch of the really great nonprofits in our community. And in 2019, it's maybe a little bit of acknowledgement for the community role our police department plays. Both the Man and Woman of the Year, named by the Chamber of Commerce, were from our police department. So I'm really proud of the work that our police department has done. There's always more to do on something like this. It's never done, but I know it's been something that I've always focused on as manager here, and the police chief has as well. And we will continue to, with the guidance from our city council, because this is obviously a priority for all of us.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson, what is Capitola doing to ensure that the kinds of racial injustice issues in policing we've seen throughout the country don't happen here?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question. I think that we've all kind of seen that our country is in a time of transformation, and what we've witnessed in terms of racial injustice, systemic racial injustice, has really caused us all to look within ourselves and into our communities to determine how we can be better, how our communities can be better, and what changes need to be made as we move forward. I can tell you that our police chief, Terry McManus, is deeply committed to community policing and is ensuring that our department has a sincere understanding of the need to connect and engage with the community and to understand what community policing looks like from a community's perspective. This commitment isn't new, of course. Our former police chief, Chief Rudy Escalante, was also a champion of neighborhood engagement. These are the type of law enforcement leaders that our community expects and deserves. This is additionally the leadership style that we hope to continue to develop through our succession planning in our city. I can tell you that all of our officers are trained in de-escalation, and 2 of them have advanced de-escalation training. Through de-escalation, officers learn how to integrate communications, situation assessment, and tactics in an effort to slow down police response, so to speak, while more appropriately managing and supporting individuals who are experiencing crisis. And this reduces the need for increasing levels of force. Capitola was one of the first law enforcement agencies in the county to have both body-worn cameras and vehicle cameras. And these are steps that are supported by the ACLU. As our city manager mentioned, our police have been involved in these dialogue circles with the United Way. In looking at things like use of force, looking at the numbers, I can tell you that Capitola PD had approximately 220,000 calls for service in the last 10 years. Of those, 0.023% involved incidents with use of force in that time period in the last 20 years. National data is a little bit harder to come by, but in looking at a study that we could find from 2001, it looks like that percentage, our use of force percentage in the last 20 years is about 37% lower than the national average. And then finally, I'll say that our city contracts with Police Strategies, a firm out of the Pacific Northwest, to analyze our use of force incidents. And we're one of only less than 100 in the country to do this kind of level of analysis on each use of force incident. And the dashboard about that, with that analysis, is public and it's available on our website. So thank you for that very important question.
Thank you so much, Mayor Peterson. City Manager Goldstein, just to follow up, what is the demographic makeup of the Capitola Police Department?
So we have 22 sworn officers. 55% of them are white, 35% Hispanic, and 10% other.
Thank you. And also for the city manager, we've had quite a few questions come in from the public asking how to show their appreciation for Capitola PD, wanting to arrange a meal, something to be dropped off, and just really wanting to show their respect and their appreciation. So how might the public go forward in doing that?
Yeah, our police department has really seen an outpouring of support during these difficult times. You know, I don't think anybody got into the policing. Well, I know none of us expected to have to be enforcing a pandemic regulations at the same time that we were challenged by so many just real fundamental questions about equality and justice. And, you know, you don't get to pick the times you live in, but, you know, these are really important issues and they need to be resolved. And so our police department has been on the faced the brunt of a lot of this stuff, and we have seen an outpouring of support. We understand that sharing food is often a great way to show your support. And we've had folks drop stuff off at the police station. If you want, you can give a call there, 475-4242, if you want to arrange a time, or you can just swing by. So that support is always welcome. Thank
you so much, City Manager Goldstein and Mayor Peterson. That's the conclusion of our pre-submitted questions. I'm going to give this just a minute here to see if any of our attendees want to write into the chat a question. I am seeing a few people, again, appreciating the outdoor dining in the village. So thank you for that feedback. And asking again, what kind of things are open in our town? Is it worth coming to visit? I think you covered that, but if you want to add anything to that type of question, please go ahead. And I'll wait here and see if we get any more in our Q&A.
I'll take a stab at I think we saw a question about somebody coming in late July, what will be open? I think as we mentioned, the city doesn't control that. That's the health officer who will be making the beach regulations. At this point, we think that it's possible that the beach restrictions will lift on July 6th, where the state is in the resilience roadmap. We don't know. I know that they've been moving towards greater openings. I think everybody should look at the data statewide and keep their eye on it. I do know that the state is going to be producing what they're calling a dashboard that shows how each state is doing in terms of their movement into the later stages of recovery. So predicting what the future will look like a month from now, I think is a challenge that I probably wouldn't suggest I could do. But at this point, we do hope that the beach will be open and the restaurants are open and the hotels are opening as well.
Thank you. I'm seeing a question. I'm going to leave this to the two of you. What about the Capitola Art and Wine Festival? And is that canceled? It's a very beloved event.
That's my understanding is that it has been canceled this year. Can you confirm that, Jamie?
So I don't believe it has been firmly canceled
Oh, it
yet.
hasn't.
Yeah, but that's a decision that the organizers would need to make this far out. You know, the city of Capitola is going to be following the best available health guidance and the guidance from the state and from the county about large gatherings like that. And so if we were to see a health order that extended into when the Art and Wine Festival would occur, that prohibited it, that's when we would cancel as a city. I do know that the organizers are evaluating the feasibility of putting it on this year. It's going to be a challenge. You know, hosting large events is probably one of the things that comes relatively late in the resilience roadmap. The one thing it does have going forward is it is outdoors. It's not an indoor event. So there hasn't been a final decision on it, but yeah, I don't know how it'll turn out yet.
Thank you. Here's another question for you, City Manager Goldstein, regarding, the opinion that there may be a large spike in COVID-19 cases, hopefully not, but possible with things reopening. Is there a specific number that would put our county back into a stricter shelter in place? Have you been briefed with any information to that effect?
Do you want to talk about Mayor Peterson?
Yeah, sure. My understanding, and jump in and correct me, Jamie, if I'm inaccurate here. My understanding is that moving forward, the state is essentially going to have red, yellow, and green stages based on the number of cases that are in your county. Based on what I heard this morning, if our case positivity rate hits 8%, then we will be essentially added to a list of counties that the state is monitoring, is watching, and they will be providing guidance to us on how to get our cases back down to an acceptable level. But my understanding is that at least from the statewide level, there's no indication that there will be a re-implementation of a stricter shelter in place order than we're already under. Can you confirm that, Jamie, or if there's anything I missed there?
Yeah, I think that was what I know as well. That was an exact question that I asked the health officer on our call last week is there a specific metric that she would be evaluating where she would be looking going the other direction in terms of closing up things rather than opening them. And what she did was she pointed us towards the attestation that the county had to file with the state that does include specific metrics. And then she also mentioned, as Mayor Peterson did, the dashboard that the state's going to be having where different counties are going to be kind of classified as doing great, green, yellow, warning, and red problem areas. And that they would then be, if you ended up in meeting those metrics to get into the stage red, that the state would be working with the local health officers to implement, identify what the problem is and what are the necessary solutions. So my intuition is that if we did end up in a situation where we were identified as red in the dashboard, we would probably be seeing things go the other direction in terms of segments of the economy getting shut down. But for the time being, our numbers haven't spiked. We've seen some one-off jumps a couple days here recently, but overall the numbers haven't shown a real significant upward trend over the last several weeks. But it is certainly a concern for everybody as this reopens, is how is it going to play out over time? And I think everyone's well advised to keep an eye on the numbers, as I do all the time, and then communicate regularly with the health officer to figure out where we're going to be going.
Thank you. I'm seeing a budget question. Does the 2021 proposed budget offer reduction in fees for services for businesses, business licenses, TOT, et cetera?
Well, I know that the recent actions we took to allow for the permits for outdoor dining and the takeout windows and other measures that encourage social distancing, those are free. We didn't have any kind of fees for those permits for our businesses.
Yeah, that's correct. In addition, we didn't increase, we left our fees, our regular fee schedule alone just last meeting. Normally we increase those every year with the CPI, the cost of living increase. So those didn't change. We kept those frozen. And then we did waive the fees for all the modifications that businesses would make to help comply with social distancing requirements.
Thank you. One more question here. What is the status on the rail trail at this point?
So I can answer that a little bit. So there's a couple different segments of the trail, but the most interesting thing that's going on with the rail trail right now is the County of Santa Cruz is looking at doing environmental documentation, that's doing the environmental studies to build the rail trail all the way from, Aptos Village to Live Oak, which is kind of great that they're taking the lead. So Capitola, that obviously includes Capitola. So the County of Santa Cruz is doing that level of review, the environmental work necessary to kind of get all that done at once. I'm not sure where they are in that process, but it was going to be a multi-year process. Once that's done, then it's just a question of funding the different segments of the rail trail. So that's where the overall rail trail in Capitola is. It's in this environmental review stage that the County of Santa Cruz is leading for us. We do have a very minor little segment of rail trail that we've been trying to build for a while now. That's just from the upper parking lot behind City Hall over to Monterey. That would let people get from the parking lot without walking in the driveway there. That's bugged me for 10 years that we don't have a good way out of that parking lot. And we've been working for almost 10 years to try to figure out a way to get people out and get them up on the train track right away and get them safely out. So that is one segment that we do hope to move forward in advance of the overall rail trail. But it's, I don't know that that really qualifies as a rail trail. It's about 300 yards worth of a pathway.
Thank you, City Manager. And I'm seeing one final question here. What about the classic car show, and is that also canceled?
Yeah, the classic car show put on by the Capitola Public Safety Foundation would have been, I believe, last weekend, and they went virtual this year. So that's kind of exciting that they were still able to provide an opportunity for former and current participants to be a part of that in some way. But like many of the events and meetings that we're seeing nowadays in the COVID-19 era, it was not able to be held in person. So it became a virtual event. And I believe that they will, if they haven't already, I haven't checked, but I believe they will be announcing the winner of their virtual car show, I'm sure, on their social media and their website.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Now I'm looking and not seeing any further questions. Thank you so much for your time in answering everything that came in live, as well as all of the submittals we had prior to this community update. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Mayor Peterson or City Manager Goldstein?
I would just like to say thank you to all the community members for participating, for sending in questions in advance, and for participating today, and for our staff, our police officers, all of our residents, everyone for truly pulling together so that we can all get through this together. And sorry, Jamie, I think I cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, that was great. I think I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. All right.
Thank you all for being. Okay.